In this video, I'll show you how to create a stream of water falling into a cup. We'll also create the cup itself using a Boolean operation. First, let's create the tube that will be the cup by clicking on the tube in the Create menu at the top of the screen. In the viewport, click where you want to place the tube. Make sure to make it bigger by either scaling or changing the scale in the object's properties on the right. I use a scale of 4 for the X and Z and 5 for the Y axis. In order to make this into a cup, we first need to make it have end caps. Click on the second icon on the left or by pressing 2 to switch to Geometry Select mode. Then, on the object's properties on the right, select End Caps. Switch back to Object Select mode by clicking on the first icon on the left or by pressing 1, or you'll have issues in the next step. Now we need to duplicate this object so we can create an opening for the cup. Go to the top shelf and click on the Modify tab. Then select Duplicate. Move the new cylinder up on the Y-axis so that it sticks a bit above the other cylinder. Do this by selecting the Move tool or by pressing T on your keyboard. Then select the green arrow and move it up a bit. We need to scale the new cylinder on the X and Z axes to create the opening. To do this, select the Scale tool on the left or press the E key. Drag the green plane between the blue and red cubes to scale on both the X and Z axes. Make sure you're back in selection mode by clicking on the cursor on the right or by pressing S. Click on the original larger cylinder to select it. Now, switch to the Model tab in the shelf and select Boolean. It will ask you for another object, so select the new, smaller cylinder and press Enter. Now it will show highlighted the intersection of the two cylinders, but we don't want that. So, in the properties on the right, change the operation under Output Geometry from Intersect to Subtract. Now we have the cup. Switch back to Object Select mode, and now let's create a sphere which will emit water. Under the Create tab in the shelf, select Sphere and place it in the scene on top of the cup. Then, click on green arrow and drag it up. To make the sphere emit water, go to the Particle Fluids tab on the right side of the shelf. Then, select Emit Particle Fluid. It will ask you if you want to emit into a fluid object, but we don't have one, so just press Enter. Now if we hit play, we'll notice that the water goes straight through our cup. We must make the cup have collision. So let's stop playing the animation and go to the first frame. To give the cup collision, make sure you're in select mode and select the cup. Then select the Collisions tab on the right side of the shelf and select a static object. Now when we hit play, the water falls into the cup, but we cannot see inside the cup. Let's add a glass material for the cup. Select the Material Palette tab on the bottom right pane and drag the glass material onto the cup. When we deselect the cup, we can no longer see it. This seems to be a graphical problem with Houdini that can be fixed by changing the view back and forth. So switch to the Animation Editor, then back to the Scene view. Now when we deselect the cup, we can still see it. Press play again, and now we can see the cup. Now let's try rendering a frame. Select a good looking frame and switch to the Render View tab. Press Render to start rendering. After a while we can't see very well because we never added a light. So stop the rendering and switch back to the Scene view. Under the Lights and Cameras tab on the right side of the shelf, click the Skylight option. Now our scene is nicely lit. Go back to the render view and render the frame. It will take a bit of time. Here's the finished render of the water splashing out of the cup.